Emma Carter, 27, had always known what it meant to scrape by. Growing up in a struggling Chicago neighborhood, she watched her parents juggle bills, their faces etched with worry as they counted coins for groceries. The memory of an empty fridge at 12 years old, her stomach growling while she lied to her mom about not being hungry, stuck with her. It wasn't just hunger, it was the fear of falling apart, of losing the little they had. Her mother's words echoed through her childhood. "Find someone who can provide, Emma. Love fades, but security lasts." That lesson shaped her, a compass pointing toward safety. Now, at 27, Emma had clawed her way out. She'd landed a paralegal job at a mid-sized law firm downtown, her first step into a world where paychecks came on time. Her cubicle wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, a small victory over the chaos of her past. She spent her days organizing case files, her precision earning quiet nods from the attorneys. Outside work, she kept her life simple: weekly meal preps, a modest savings account, and a determination to never slip back into uncertainty. 2 years ago, she met Ryan Bennett at a networking event. He was a software engineer, 30, with a steady job at a tech company in the Loop. Ryan wasn't flashy or loud. He was the kind of man who showed up on time, spoke clearly, and always followed through. When he asked Emma out, she noticed his calm confidence, the way he talked about his 5-year plan, career growth, a house, maybe a family. It wasn't poetry, but it was a promise of stability, and to Emma, that was better than any love song. Their first date at a quiet diner turned into weekly dinners, then a relationship built on shared goals. Ryan paid for meals without hesitation, planned dates with care, and never let a bill go overdue. For Emma, he was a lifeline. They married 18 months later in a small ceremony at a Chicago community center, surrounded by close friends and Emma's parents, who beamed at Ryan like he was their own. The couple moved into a modest suburban home in Oak Park, a place Ryan had bought before they met. It was practical: 2 bedrooms, a small yard close to the train. Emma felt a weight lift the first time she walked through the door. The fridge was always stocked, the mortgage paid on time, and Ryan's spreadsheets tracked their budget down to the cent. For the first time, Emma slept without the nagging fear of losing it all. Their routine was steady, almost mechanical. Mornings started with coffee and quick kisses before Ryan caught the train to work. Evenings were for grocery lists, shared dinners, and talks about retirement accounts or home repairs. Ryan liked to plan, vacations scheduled a year out, car maintenance on a strict calendar. Emma admired his discipline, even if their conversations rarely strayed from practicalities. She tried to share a funny story from work, but Ryan would nod, offer a quick fix, and move on to the next task. "You should talk to your boss about that," he'd say, already checking his phone. It wasn't cold, just efficient, and Emma told herself efficiency was what she'd always wanted. But 6 months into their marriage, something stirred in Emma. It wasn't a loud rebellion, just a quiet itch. She'd catch herself staring out the train window on her commute, wondering if this was all there was: bills paid, fridge full, life on track, but no surprises. No moments that made her heart race. She'd scroll through social media, seeing friends post about spontaneous trips or late-night adventures, and feel a pang she couldn't explain. Her mother's voice still rang in her ears, security over love, but Emma started to wonder what she traded for it. One Saturday, she volunteered to run errands alone, needing a break from their routine. At a cozy coffee shop in Logan Square, she stood in line, half listening to the barista's chatter. As she reached for her latte, her bag slipped, spilling her wallet and keys onto the floor. Before she could react, a man knelt to pick them up. "These carts are a nightmare," he said with an easy smile, handing her things back. His name was Jake, a freelance photographer with a relaxed vibe that felt like the opposite of Ryan's precision. He didn't rush off. Instead, he made a quip about the shop's wobbly tables, and Emma laughed, a real laugh, not the polite one she gave at home. Jake asked if she came here often, and she said yes, though it wasn't true. They talked for 10 minutes, longer than she'd planned, about nothing important: Chicago's best taco spots, a band playing downtown. His questions were curious, not calculated, and he listened like he actually cared. When she left, he asked for her number, calling it a "just in case we run into each other again." Emma hesitated, then gave it, telling herself it was harmless. She drove home, Jake's smile lingering in her mind, a small crack in the life she'd built so carefully. That night, as Ryan reviewed their monthly budget at the kitchen table, Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Found that taco place you mentioned. Worth the hype?" She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering. Ryan didn't look up. She typed a quick reply, her heart beating just a little faster. It was just a text, she told herself. Just a moment of something new. Emma's phone buzzed again the next morning, Jake's name lighting up the screen. "Coffee same time tomorrow?" it read. She stared at it during her train commute, her thumb hesitating over the reply. Ryan was already at work, his briefcase gone from the hall, their morning routine as predictable as ever. She typed "sure" and hit send, her pulse quickening. It was just coffee, she reasoned, a harmless break from the monotony of her life with Ryan. But deep down, she knew it was more. The Logan Square coffee shop became their spot. Jake was there the next day, leaning casually against the counter, waving her over like they'd known each other for years. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, stories of his photography gigs, her quirky coworkers at the law firm, the time she snuck into a concert as a teenager. Jake listened, his eyes locked on hers, asking questions that made her feel seen in a way Ryan's practical nods never did. She didn't talk about her marriage, and Jake didn't ask. It was as if they'd silently agreed to keep the real world at bay. Over the next 2 weeks, their meetings became a ritual. Emma started inventing excuses to slip away: late hours at the office, a friend's birthday dinner, a non-existent book club. Ryan accepted her stories without question, his trust unwavering. "Just text me when you're home," he'd say, engrossed in his laptop. Emma felt a twinge of guilt each time, but Jake's messages drowned it out. "Saw a mural you'd love," he'd text, attaching a photo of vibrant street art. She'd smile at her phone during lunch breaks, her coworkers raising eyebrows but saying nothing. Jake was everything Ryan wasn't: spontaneous, unfiltered, living for the moment. One afternoon, he convinced her to ditch work early for a walk along the Chicago River. They wandered past tourists and joggers, Jake pointing out details she'd never noticed: the way the water reflected the skyline, a busker's guitar riff echoing off the bridges. He handed her a coffee from a street vendor, their fingers brushing briefly. The touch sent a jolt through her, and she didn't pull away. "You ever just do something because it feels right?" he asked, his voice low. Emma nodded, her throat tight, knowing she was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Back home, Ryan's routine marched on. He'd greet her with a quick kiss, ask about her day, and pivot to their shared calendar: grocery runs, oil changes, a reminder to renew their insurance. Emma played her part, nodding along, but her mind drifted to Jake's laugh, his stories, the way he made her feel like she was more than a checklist. She started leaving her phone face down, worried Ryan might notice the constant buzz of Jake's texts. The lies came easier now, small, practiced, slipping out before she could second-guess them. One evening, Jake suggested they meet at a dive bar in Wicker Park. Emma hesitated, knowing it was riskier than their daytime coffee runs. "It's just a drink," she told herself, texting Ryan about a work happy hour. The bar was crowded, the air thick with chatter and clinking glasses. Jake was waiting at a corner table, his camera bag slung over the chair. They talked for hours, the noise fading as he leaned closer, sharing a story about a photo shoot in New Orleans. When he reached for her hand under the table, she let him hold it. The warmth of his grip felt like a rebellion against everything she'd built with Ryan. That night she got home late, her cheeks flushed from the cold and the thrill. Ryan was asleep on the couch, a spreadsheet open on his laptop. She tiptoed past, her heart pounding, and deleted Jake's texts before plugging in her phone. The guilt was there, sharper now, but so was the rush. Jake made her feel alive, like she was waking up after years of sleepwalking. She told herself she could keep it under control: see Jake, keep Ryan, balance both worlds without breaking either. But Ryan wasn't as oblivious as she thought. He noticed the late nights, the way Emma's laughter had faded at home, how she checked her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. One morning, as she rushed out for errands, he stared at the door, his jaw tight. He didn't want to believe she was hiding something, but the pieces didn't add up. That evening, he opened her laptop, left unlocked on the kitchen counter. A notification pinged, a message from Jake, unread but visible. Missed you today? Tomorrow? Ryan's stomach dropped. He closed the laptop, his hands steady but his mind racing. He wouldn't confront her yet. He needed proof. The next day, Emma met Jake at a small art gallery, another excuse about a client meeting, texted to Ryan. Jake had invited her to see a friend's exhibit, and they wandered through the displays, whispering about the paintings. He stood close, his arm brushing hers, and when he suggested grabbing dinner, she didn't hesitate. They ended up at a taco truck, laughing over greasy carnitas and shared sodas. You're different lately, Jake said, his eyes searching hers. Happier. Emma smiled, but a knot formed in her chest. She was happier with him, but every moment with Jake pulled her further from Ryan. Ryan, meanwhile, took action. He downloaded a tracking app, linking it to Emma's phone during a moment when she left it charging. It felt wrong, but so did her lies. The app confirmed what he feared: her work events were visits to cafes, bars, and an apartment in Logan Square. Ryan didn't yell or break things. He sat in silence, planning his next move. He called a lawyer friend, asking about divorce proceedings, his voice calm but resolute. Emma's betrayal was clear, but he wouldn't let it destroy him. He'd end it on his terms. Emma came home that night, her mind still on Jake's goodbye, a quick hug that lingered too long. Ryan was at the kitchen table, his laptop closed, his expression unreadable. Long day? He asked, his tone neutral. Emma nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, crazy at work. She didn't notice the way his eyes lingered on her, searching for the woman he thought he knew. The trap was set, and Emma was walking right into it, unaware that her carefully balanced worlds were about to collide. Emma's double life was a tightrope, and she was convinced she could keep walking it. Her days with Ryan ticked along like clockwork, shared breakfasts, quick updates about work, and evenings spent planning their next practical move. But her stolen hours with Jake were electric, each one a jolt that made her feel like she was stealing back pieces of herself. She ignored the growing weight in her chest, the way her lies stacked up like unpaid bills. She told herself she could handle it, that she deserved this spark after years of playing it safe. Jake, meanwhile, pushed for more. Their coffee meetups had turned into dinners, then late-night walks through Chicago's bustling streets. One evening, he suggested they visit his apartment to see his latest photo project. Emma hesitated, knowing it was a step too far, but his easy smile and the way he said, "Just for an hour, I promise," pulled her in. She texted Ryan about a last-minute work thing, and followed Jake to his place in Logan Square. The visit started innocently, photos spread across a table, stories about his travels, but when he kissed her, she didn't pull away. The line she'd been tiptoeing around was gone, and she didn't look back. Ryan's suspicions had hardened into certainty. The tracking app on Emma's phone showed her at the same Logan Square address 3 times that week, each visit during her so-called work events. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he gathered evidence with the precision of the engineer he was. He saved screenshots of her locations, cross-referenced them with her texts, and even found Jake's name in her call logs. Ryan's calm was deceptive. Inside, he was reeling, but he refused to let emotion cloud his judgment. He met with his lawyer friend again, this time to draft separation papers. "I need to be sure," he told her, his voice steady. "But I already know." Emma, oblivious, kept up her routine. She'd come home to Ryan, smile through their dinners, and nod along to his plans for a summer vacation or a new savings goal. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying Jake's touch, his laughter, the way he made her feel like the center of his world. She started slipping, leaving her phone unlocked, forgetting to clear her notifications. One night, she left it charging on the counter while she showered, and a text from Jake popped up. "Can't stop thinking about last night." Ryan saw it, his jaw tightening. He didn't open the message, but it was the final push he needed. The next day, Ryan installed a small security camera in their living room, angled to catch the front door. It wasn't about spying, it was about ending the doubt. He told himself he'd only check it if she lied again. That evening, Emma claimed she was meeting a coworker for drinks. Ryan nodded, said, "Have fun," and waited. The camera feed, synced to his phone, showed her walking in at 11 p.m. with Jake. They laughed, kissed, and disappeared down the hall. Ryan watched the footage in real time, his face blank but his hands clenched. He saved the clip and shut off his phone. Emma's lies grew bolder. She started staying out later, claiming overtime or girls' nights. Jake, unaware of her marriage, never questioned her stories, happy to soak up their time together. One night, at a rooftop bar, he pulled her close during a slow song, whispering, "You're the best thing that's happened to me." Emma's heart raced, but a flicker of guilt cut through. She pushed it down, focusing on the moment, convincing herself she could keep both lives separate forever. Ryan, however, was done waiting. He chose a Friday night, knowing Emma had another work dinner planned. He spent the day finalizing his plan, papers ready, lawyer on speed dial, and the camera footage backed up. When Emma texted that she'd be home late, he replied, "No rush," and set his laptop on the kitchen table. He didn't pace or rehearse, he just waited, calm but resolute, like a man who'd already made his peace. Emma walked in at midnight, her cheeks flushed from her evening with Jake. She froze when she saw Ryan sitting in the dim light, his laptop open. "Sit down," he said, his voice low but firm. She tried to play it off, asking, "What's up?" with a forced smile. Ryan didn't answer. He turned the laptop toward her and hit play. The footage rolled, her and Jake at the front door, their kiss, their laughter. Emma's stomach dropped. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She stammered, "Ryan, I can explain." But he raised a hand, cutting her off. "There's nothing to explain," he said, his tone ice-cold but controlled. "I trusted you. I built a life for us. And you threw it away." Emma's eyes welled up, but Ryan didn't soften. He slid a folder across the table, separation papers, neatly prepared. "This house is mine. You know that. Pack your things and go." His words were sharp, final, no room for negotiation. Emma tried to speak, to beg, but Ryan stood, closing the laptop with a snap. "You made your choice. Now live with it." She sat frozen as he walked upstairs, her mind racing. The footage replayed in her head, undeniable proof of her betrayal. She'd thought she could keep her worlds apart, but they'd collided, and the wreckage was hers alone. As she heard Ryan's footsteps above, she realized there was no talking her way out. The life she'd built with him, safe, stable, predictable, was over. And the man she'd risked it all for wasn't there to catch her. Emma's world unraveled faster than she could grasp. After Ryan's confrontation, she packed a single suitcase, her hands shaking as she stuffed it with essentials. The silence in their Oak Park home was deafening, no arguments, no second chances, just Ryan's steady gaze as he held the door open. She stepped out into the cold Chicago night, the weight of her choices heavier than the bag on her shoulder. She had nowhere to go but her parents' small apartment in Pilsen, a place she'd sworn she'd never return to. Her parents' reaction was worse than she'd feared. Her mother, Maria, opened the door, saw the suitcase, and froze. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice sharp with dread. Emma tried to explain, but the words tumbled out in fragments. Jake, the lies, Ryan's discovery. Her father, Luis, overheard from the living room and erupted. "You had everything," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Ryan gave you a life we could only dream of, and you spit on it." Maria tried to calm him, but her eyes were wet with disappointment. They let Emma stay in their cramped guest room, but the air was thick with resentment. Luis barely looked at her, and Maria's help came with sighs and pointed silences. Emma reached out to Jake the next morning, texting him a desperate, "We need to talk." No reply. She called twice, left a voicemail, but her phone stayed silent. She scrolled through their old messages, his jokes, his photos, his promises, and realized he'd vanished the moment her life collapsed. Jake wasn't a partner. He was a fantasy, and fantasies don't stick around for the fallout. The sting of his absence cut deeper than her parents' anger, a reminder that she'd risked everything for someone who didn't care enough to answer. With no savings of her own, Ryan had handled their finances. Emma needed a job fast. She spent days pounding the pavement, dropping resumes at every store in the loop. A convenience store clerk smirked when she handed over her application. "Aren't you the one who was with that tech guy?" he asked, his tone dripping with gossip. Emma's face burned, but she nodded and moved on. Word of her betrayal had spread, carried by mutual friends and nosy neighbors. Each rejection felt like a public shaming, her past stability now a mocking memory. She finally landed a job as a cashier at a discount home goods store on Michigan Avenue. The pay was barely above minimum wage, the hours grueling, and the manager barked orders like she was invisible. Emma stood behind the register for 8-hour shifts, scanning chipped mugs and faded towels, her feet aching and her mind replaying Ryan's final words. "You made your choice." She rented a tiny studio apartment in a rundown building, using her first paycheck to cover the deposit. The fridge was empty most days, and she survived on instant noodles, a cruel echo of the childhood she'd fought to escape. Her social circle crumbled. Friends who'd once admired her perfect marriage stopped calling, their texts replaced by vague excuses or silence. At a rare coffee meetup, her old coworker Sarah was blunt. "You had it all, Emma. Why'd you throw it away?" Emma mumbled something about needing to feel alive, but Sarah just shook her head and left. The isolation was suffocating. Emma's phone, once buzzing with Jake's messages, now held only bill reminders and ignored voicemails from her mother, urging her to fix this. Her parents' support, already strained, dried up completely when Louise learned the full story. Ryan had been sending them monthly checks to keep their small bakery afloat, a fact Emma hadn't known. When the payments stopped, Louise's anger boiled over. "You didn't just ruin your life, you dragged us down with you," he yelled one night, as Emma sat silently at their kitchen table. Maria didn't defend her, just whispered, "We can't afford to help you anymore." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She'd burned every bridge, and the ashes were her new reality. Nights in her studio were the hardest. Alone, she'd scroll through old photos of her and Ryan, dinners they'd planned, vacations they'd saved for. Each image was a stab of regret. She'd wanted excitement, but now she had nothing, no husband, no lover, no safety net. She tried texting Jake one last time, a simple, "Are you there?" The message stayed on. Delivered. Unanswered. She deleted his contact, her hands trembling, and cried herself to sleep, the weight of her choices pressing down like a physical force. At the store, customers were her only interaction, and even those were laced with judgment. One afternoon, a woman from her old neighborhood came through her line, recognized her, and muttered, "Guess you thought you were too good for what you had." Emma forced a smile, bagged the woman's items, and said nothing. The humiliation was constant, a reminder that her actions had ripple effects she couldn't outrun. She started avoiding mirrors, not wanting to face the person she'd become. Ryan, meanwhile, was moving forward. Emma heard through a mutual friend that he'd been promoted at work, his focus unshaken by their split. He hadn't badmouthed her, hadn't spread the video or gloated. His silence was louder than any revenge, a testament to the dignity she'd betrayed. Emma clung to the hope that he might reach out, that there was a way to undo the damage. But deep down, she knew the truth, she'd lost him, not because he hated her, but because he no longer needed her. Emma's new reality was a grind. Her cashier job at the Michigan Avenue store barely covered rent for her cramped Chicago studio, and every dollar was a reminder of the life she'd lost. The sting of Ryan's departure and Jake's abandonment lingered, but her parents' rejection cut deepest. Louise and Maria, once her anchors, now treated her like a stranger. Dinner at their Pilsen apartment was silent, Louise's eyes fixed on his plate, Maria offering only clipped responses. Emma ate quickly and left, knowing she was no longer welcome. Days blurred into weeks of scanning barcodes and dodging judgmental glances from customers who'd heard whispers of her scandal. She kept her head down, but the shame followed her. One evening, as she locked up the store, her phone buzzed, a message from Ryan's sister, Claire, a nurse who'd always been kind but distant. "Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., coffee shop on Clark," it read. Emma's stomach twisted. She hadn't seen Claire since the wedding, and the thought of facing her now felt like walking into a trap. But she agreed, desperate for any connection to her old life. At the coffee shop, Claire was already seated, her expression calm but unreadable. Emma braced for anger, but Claire's voice was steady. "Ryan's moved on," she said, stirring her coffee. "He forgave you, Emma. Not for you, but for himself. He's not coming back." The words landed like a quiet blow. Emma had clung to the faint hope of reconciliation, but Claire's clarity snuffed it out. "He's not angry," Claire continued. "He just doesn't want to carry this anymore." Emma nodded, tears welling, but Claire didn't comfort her. She paid for her coffee and left, her message delivered. That night, Emma sat alone in her studio, Claire's words echoing. Ryan's forgiveness wasn't a lifeline, it was a door closing. She'd expected rage, maybe a fight, but his choice to let go without hate was worse. It showed a strength she'd never had. She opened her phone, scrolling through old messages from Jake, now months unanswered. Deleting them felt final, like burying a version of herself she barely recognized. She needed to face what she'd done, not just to Ryan, but to herself. The next week, Emma found a flyer for a free community center program in her neighborhood, counseling sessions for locals struggling with life changes. She signed up, hesitant but desperate for a way forward. Her first session was raw. Sitting across from a therapist, she spilled everything: her childhood fears, her obsession with security, her betrayal of Ryan, her fling with Jake. The therapist listened, then asked, "What do you want now?" Emma didn't know. For years, she chased safety, then excitement, but both had left her empty. "I want to be someone I can stand to look at," she finally said. Therapy became her anchor. Twice a week, she unpacked her choices, learning to name the fear that drove her to Jake, fear of a life too rigid, too predictable. She realized she hadn't loved Ryan the way he deserved, using him as a shield against her past. Jake, meanwhile, was a mirage, a fleeting escape from her own emptiness. The sessions didn't erase her guilt, but they gave her a path to accountability. She started journaling, writing letters to Ryan she'd never send, apologizing not to win him back, but to own her mistakes. Ryan, meanwhile, thrived. He'd taken a lead role at his tech company, his focus sharper without the weight of a fractured marriage. Friends mentioned he was dating again, casually, no rush to rebuild what Emma had broken. He didn't speak of her, didn't share the video or fuel gossip. His silence was his strength, a refusal to let her betrayal define him. When a mutual friend asked about Emma, he said simply, "I wish her well," and changed the subject. Emma took small steps toward rebuilding. She volunteered at the community center, helping organize food drives for families like the one she'd grown up in. The work was exhausting but grounding, a reminder of the stakes beyond her own regrets. She tutored kids on weekends, their chatter a welcome distraction from her thoughts. Slowly, she began to see herself differently, not as the woman who betrayed her husband, but as someone capable of change. Her parents noticed, too. Maria started inviting her for coffee, their talks tentative but less strained. Luis remained distant, but one evening, he handed her a plate of leftovers without a word, a small gesture, but enough. One day, while sorting donations at the center, Emma found an envelope in her bag, no stamp, just her name in Ryan's precise handwriting. Her heart raced as she opened it. The letter was short, direct. Ryan wrote that he'd known from the start she feared becoming her parents, trapped in poverty. He'd tried to give her stability, hoping it would be enough. "I saw your heart wasn't in it," he wrote. "I stayed anyway, thinking time might change you. That was my mistake." He didn't accuse or curse her. Instead, he thanked her for showing him that love means letting go when someone's heart isn't yours. "I'm free now," he ended. "I hope you find that too." Emma read it 3 times, her hands steady but her chest tight. Ryan's forgiveness wasn't absolution, it was closure, a gift she didn't deserve but couldn't reject. She tucked the letter away, knowing it was the last she'd hear from him. At the community center, she threw herself into her work, helping a single mom fill out job applications. As they talked, Emma shared a piece of her story, not for pity, but to connect. The mom nodded, grateful, and Emma felt a flicker of purpose. Her life wasn't what it had been, and it never would be. The scars of her choices, Ryan's trust, her parents' respect, her own self-worth, remained. But for the first time, Emma wasn't running from them. She was building something new, not out of fear or desire, but out of accountability. The road ahead was long, but she walked it with eyes open, knowing some mistakes can't be undone, only learned from.